You wake up one morning and hear the loudest noise ever. 10 huge bulldozers are surrounding your house like giant yellow monsters. They're blocking every way out. Your horses are scared and running around. Your chickens are freaking out. There's this crazy lady with a megaphone yelling about health problems while black smoke fills the air. Your 12-year-old daughter is watching all your animals suffer behind this wall of metal machines. This crazy woman was Bethany Clearwater. She was the boss of our neighborhood group. She thought she found the perfect way to steal my grandfather's 47-acre farm. But she had no idea I just got a new job with the government, a job that gave me the power to shut down her whole evil plan with just one phone call. What would you do if some power-crazy person literally trapped your family's way of making money? Tell me where you live in the comments. I need to know how many of you are dealing with these neighborhood bullies. Let me take you back to how this nightmare started. 3 months before this happened, I got this 47-acre piece of heaven from my grandfather in rural Tennessee. We had been growing organic vegetables for 3 generations. We had free-range chickens and beautiful horses that had been eating grass in these fields since before most of these fancy houses were even built. Every morning, fog would roll over our fields like clockwork. I could smell the sweet hay mixed with my first cup of coffee. You could hear the gentle sounds of our chickens scratching in the dirt. Our big horses would shake the morning dew off their hair. I would run my rough hands along those old wooden fence posts my grandfather built. That bumpy, weathered wood told stories of many years of honest work and zero tolerance for nonsense. Every morning at 5:30, my boots would crunch across the gravel driveway. Same routine Grandpa followed for 40 years. I was rebuilding my life here after a divorce that left me with more debt than a college student and less trust in people than a used car salesman. Just me and my 12-year-old daughter, Maple. Trying to make this old farm profitable while keeping 3 generations of family traditions alive, here's where the universe decided to mess with us. The county changed some rules recently. It's the kind of paperwork shuffle that happens when developers start throwing money around. This meant part of our property technically fell within the new Whispering Pines Estates neighborhood group boundary. We never asked to join their kingdom of matching mailboxes and identical driveways. Enter Bethany Clearwater. Picture a real estate shark mixed with a mall cop given way too much power and a clipboard. She was 50-something with blonde hair. So perfectly styled, it could survive a tornado. She drove a white Escalade that probably cost more than most people make in a year. She was a recent transplant from Atlanta, married to some developer whose business cards probably just said destroyer of rural life. This woman got elected neighborhood group president within 6 months of moving in. She campaigned like she was running for supreme dictator of suburbia. Her platform was property looks and neighborhood. Standards enforced with the enthusiasm of a crazy person and the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The first attack came on a Tuesday morning that started peaceful and went sideways fast. Bethany clicked up my driveway in designer heels, completely wrong for farm ground. But I guess intimidation doesn't require practical footwear. She carried a clipboard like it was a magic sword, and she was the chosen queen of paperwork warriors. Mr. Morrison, she announced, handing me an official-looking violation notice. This antique machinery disrupts the visual harmony of our community. She was talking about my grandfather's 1952 John Deere tractor, a machine that still ran better than most modern equipment and had more character in its rusty exhaust pipe than her entire development. Then she claimed our barn's metal roof created a visual emergency, requiring immediate correction. The woman actually used the phrase architectural terrorism to describe a building that had weathered every storm Tennessee could throw at it for 8 decades. The nuclear option was $500 in daily fines until we achieved what she called full compliance with community vision standards. When I pointed out that our farm had been feeding this community 80 years before her neighborhood group kingdom existed, she just smiled. That practice smile politicians use right before they stab you in the ballot. Box. I spent that night researching agricultural protections and grandfather clause laws until my eyes felt like they'd been sandblasted. The neighborhood group agreement had some interesting language about agricultural exemptions, but the wording seemed deliberately vague. like someone had crafted loopholes they planned to exploit later. Being a reasonable person, I tried talking first. I called Bethany and suggested we meet face to face and work this out like adults who share the same zip code. Her response was treating me like some backwoods hillbilly who couldn't possibly understand concepts like property values and community enhancement. My neighbor Dolores, a sweet 70-year-old who'd lived next to our farm since Nixon was president, pulled me aside after witnessing one of Bethany's performances. With the wisdom that comes from watching small-town politics for decades, she whispered something that made my blood run cold. "That woman's got connections at City Hall, honey. This isn't just neighborhood group power games. She's playing for something bigger." The stakes hit me like a freight train. This farm was my only income after the divorce settlement cleaned out everything except my work ethic and my grandfather's debt. Maple had fallen in love with farm life. She gathered warm eggs every morning and brushed our gentle giants, learning that real work builds real character. We still had medical bills from Grandpa's final illness that weren't going anywhere. In hiring a lawyer for extended warfare, I might as well have asked NASA for a moon vacation. But Bethany Clearwater had made one crucial mistake about rural families. We might be polite. We might try reason first. But when someone threatens what 3 generations built with their own hands, we don't roll over and play dead. We get creative, get organized. And we sure as heck don't give up without a fight that'll make the local news. Bethany wasn't content to let sleeping farmers lie. 2 weeks after her first violation notice, she escalated like a Karen who discovered the manager's personal phone number and his home address. She filed a formal complaint with county code enforcement, claiming our farm violated something called residential density requirements, apparently a fancy way of saying too many animals were living too close to her precious suburban paradise. The timing was absolutely evil. She scheduled the inspection for Maple's 12th birthday party because nothing says neighborly spirit like traumatizing a kid on her special day. The inspector who showed up was her brother-in-law Dale. A coincidence about as believable as finding a unicorn in your garage. This guy rolled up in a county truck with an attitude that screamed verdict already decided. He was carrying a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets and wearing the kind of smug expression that makes hermits seem like social butterflies. Picture this nightmare. 20 kids running around our yard, balloons dancing in the breeze, the sweet smell of vanilla birthday cake mixing with hay dust, while Maple's friends giggled at our gentlest horse. Then Dale crashes the party like the world's worst surprise guest, ready to steal childhood joy one citation at a time. "These chicken coops," he announced with theatrical authority that would have impressed Shakespeare, "appear to be unpermitted structures violating current residential building codes." He was condemning coops my grandfather built in the 1960s. Structures that had weathered more storms than Dale had probably seen weather reports. Here's where Bethany's master plan hit a brick wall built from my grandfather's obsessive record-keeping. See, Grandpa taught me that paperwork beats personalities. Every single time. And the day after inheriting this place, I'd spent a marathon session in the county courthouse basement, digging through archives older than bell-bottom jeans. Those permits were filed away like buried treasure, just waiting for the right moment. When I produced those original building permits, documents so old they felt like ancient scrolls but carried the legal weight of Mount Rushmore, Dale's confident expression crumbled faster than a cookie in milk. The man actually started stuttering, trying to explain how structures built to 1960s standards somehow violated codes they'd been grandfathered under for decades. But I wasn't done playing. Defense. During my courthouse treasure hunt, I'd stumbled across something delicious about Bethany's perfect suburban castle. That gorgeous pool deck she constantly flaunted on social media, the one where she hosted neighborhood group meetings while sipping wine and plotting against hardworking farmers. It was completely unpermitted, built without a single inspection, and clearly exceeding every setback requirement in the book. My counter-complaint hit her mailbox the next morning like a legal boomerang, complete with photographs and measurements that would make a surveyor proud. Turns out Mrs. Community Standards had been living in violation of the very rules she loved weaponizing against others. Irony so thick you could spread it on toast. Maple asked me that evening with the kind of innocent wisdom only kids possess, "Why does the mean lady hate our chickens so much?" I explained that sometimes people use rules as weapons when they can't win through honest conversation. A life lesson I prayed she'd never need, but suspected she would. Dolores appeared the next day carrying homemade apple pie and gossip hotter than fresh baked bread. Apparently Bethany's developer husband had been making rounds at City Hall, smooth-talking about development opportunities and maximizing land use potential in our neck of the woods. The puzzle pieces were clicking together, and the picture looked like a land grab disguised as community improvement. My grandfather always said that when dealing with government inspectors, you collect documentation like a pack rat and photograph everything like a crime scene investigator. He'd learned the hard way that inspectors' memories become surprisingly foggy when lawyers start asking pointed questions. But cameras don't lie, and paper trails don't forget. Dale slithered away that afternoon without issuing a single citation, his tail between his legs and his authority deflated like a punctured balloon. But I could practically see the gears grinding in his head. Bethany had played her enforcement card and lost, which meant she'd be hunting for bigger weapons. Sure enough, 2 days later, my mailbox contained a notice about an emergency neighborhood group meeting scheduled for the following week. The agenda listed exactly one item: addressing immediate community safety concerns regarding non-compliant agricultural operations, threatening property values, and resident welfare. The woman was doubling down harder than a Vegas gambler on his last hand. And something told me her next move would make this inspection comedy look like a gentle warm-up act. Bethany's emergency neighborhood group meeting was shadier than a back-alley poker game and twice as rigged. She scheduled it for 7:00 p.m. on a Thursday, peak dinner time, when working families are wrestling kids into pajamas. And somehow she accidentally forgot to notify half the neighborhood, particularly every farmer and blue-collar worker, who might have had the audacity to support our side. The meeting location was her own living room, naturally, because nothing screams official community business like conducting legal proceedings next to your wine collection and vacation photos from Cabo. When I walked in, the air reeked of expensive vanilla candles trying to mask the stench of corruption, and the deck was stacked tighter than a casino owner's favor. Bethany had packed her suburban palace with transplants, who viewed our heritage farm like urbanites view roadkill, something unpleasant that needed immediate removal. These people probably bought farm-fresh eggs at Whole Foods for $8 a dozen, while complaining about actual farms existing near their fancy houses. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bethany proclaimed. From behind her dining room table, like some self-appointed Supreme Court justice, the crystal chandelier cast dramatic shadows across her artificially concerned expression. "We face an unprecedented health and safety crisis threatening our communities, well-being, and property values." She was describing our gentle chickens like they harbored biological weapons instead of laying the freshest eggs this side of paradise. The performance would have won awards for creative fiction if it wasn't so obviously calculated to steal our livelihood. The room nodded with cult-like synchronization. Mrs. Patterson claimed our rooster's dawn calls caused severe psychological trauma. Apparently, for decades of suburban silence had made her forget that farms produce food and food animals make noise. Mr. Jenkins worried that agricultural particles might trigger his delicate allergies, completely ignoring that he'd moved next to working farmland voluntarily. Then Bethany dropped her atomic bomb: a motion to assess our property $50,000 in special community improvement. Fees for remediation of agricultural nuisances and restoration of neighborhood aesthetic harmony, $50,000, or the most honest families earn in a year. To solve problems that existed only in her suburban nightmare fantasies? Here's where her choreographed circus hit a legal brick wall. I'd been sitting quietly in the back, corner phone recording every procedural violation, while she trampled more rules than a toddler in a toy store. My grandfather taught me that patience beats panic every time, and sometimes the smartest move is letting bullies hang themselves with their own rope. When the voting charade began, I stood up and asked one beautifully simple question. Could you please confirm we have the required quorum for this assessment vote? The room went silent as a morgue at midnight. Bethany shuffled through papers like she was hunting for the Holy Grail, her composed mask cracking to reveal raw panic underneath. See, during my courthouse research sessions, I'd memorized Tennessee neighborhood group laws like scripture. Special assessments over $1,000 require supermajority votes with at least 75% of homeowners present or represented by written proxy. They had maybe 40% of the neighborhood in that room and 0 legitimate proxies. The vote was about as legal as printing your own money, and everyone with half a brain knew it. But I wasn't finished dismantling her kangaroo court. While Bethany scrambled to salvage her sinking ship, I produced my second weapon. A formal demand for complete neighborhood group financial records and meeting minutes spanning 2 years. My grandfather always said, knowledge is power, but documented. Knowledge is nuclear power, and Tennessee sunshine laws guarantee every homeowner access to community books. I'm also requesting an independent audit of all expenditures, I announced, watching color drain from Bethany's face faster than water from a broken dam, particularly payments to companies owned by board members or their families. That's when eagle-eyed pattern recognition kicked in. The financial summary she'd been waving around like evidence contained multiple large payments to Clearwater Development, LC, same last name as our neighborhood group dictator. Either the universe loved coincidences more than lottery winners, or Bethany had been funneling community money to her husband's construction company. The meeting imploded like a controlled demolition. Board members suddenly remembered urgent appointments with babysitters and early bedtimes. Mrs. Patterson's casserole miraculously needed immediate attention. Even Mr. Jenkins developed emergency dog walking responsibilities that couldn't wait another minute. Bethany tried maintaining authority, while desperation rolled off her like cheap cologne in summer heat. This meeting is adjourned, pending legal review, she declared. Fancy language for we're caught red-handed and need professional damage control. Maple waited up past her bedtime, eager for battle reports from the grown-up war. I explained that sometimes the best strategy against bullies is forcing them to follow their own rules. Something they rarely bother learning because they assume nobody will challenge their authority. Buck stopped by next morning with coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and a grin wider than the Mississippi River. Small-town gossip travels faster than wildfire, and apparently half the county was laughing about Bethany's spectacular legal faceplant. But his warning sobered me quickly. Cornered animals get vicious before they surrender, and desperate people abandon pretense for pure aggression. Within 48 hours, unfamiliar vehicles appeared across from our property, like vultures circling. Roadkill. Guys in cheap suits photographed everything and scribbled notes with the intensity of federal investigators. Bethany had graduated from amateur harassment to professional intimidation tactics. The woman was escalating faster than a space shuttle launch. An instinct told me her next assault would make this failed meeting look like a polite disagreement between reasonable neighbors. The guys in cheap suits were just Bethany's opening act, her warm-up before the main event that would make circus. Performers jealous. Within a week, she'd hired Secure Community Services to patrol our farm perimeter like we were manufacturing meth instead of growing the county's best heirloom tomatoes. These rental cops materialized in matching polo shirts and clipboards, claiming authority under neighborhood watch provisions that existed only in Bethany's alternate reality legal handbook. They parked white SUVs at strategic points around our property, photographing every visitor like paparazzi stalking celebrities. Except our celebrities were customers buying eggs and seasonal vegetables. The acrid smell of their diesel exhaust, mixing with morning dew, created this toxic perfume that reminded me daily how far we'd fallen down. Bethany's rabbit hole of suburban insanity. These guys would idle for hours, engines running, watching our horses graze with the intensity of Secret Service agents. Protecting nuclear launch codes, my longtime customers started fleeing faster than tourists from a hurricane warning. Mrs. Chen, who'd bought our heritage tomatoes religiously for 3 years, got interrogated about her suspicious agricultural transactions. It's like she was smuggling contraband instead of purchasing the finest produce this side of heaven. When they started issuing official-looking trespassing warnings to grandmothers buying eggs for Sunday baking, I knew we'd crossed from harassment into full-scale economic terrorism. Here's where amateur detective work paid off better than lottery tickets. A little digging revealed that Secure Community Services was owned by Marcus Webb, business partner to Bethany's developer husband and recipient of those mysterious neighborhood group payments I'd uncovered. What are the odds? About the same as finding honest politicians at a campaign fundraiser. But farmers don't survive 3 generations without learning that. Preparation beats panic, and documentation trumps desperation every time. I installed security. Cameras covering all public areas around our property, perfectly legal surveillance that captured every harassment incident with courtroom-quality clarity. My grandfather always said, "The best defense against liars is an honest recording," and modern technology makes that easier than milking cooperative cows. The footage revealed harassment patterns so organized they could have been choreographed by military strategists. These security goons rotated shifts with Swiss watch precision, followed detailed scripts, and documented everything like they were building federal racketeering cases. Instead of terrorizing a family farm, Dolores proved worth her weight in gold-plated legal advice when she casually dropped her professional background during one of Maple's egg collecting expeditions. 30 years at the county assessor's office had given this sweet grandmother insider knowledge that would embarrass real estate attorneys. "What they're doing isn't just harassment, honey," she explained while watching guards block another customer's vehicle. "Private security can't legally detain people on public roads or restrict access to legitimate businesses. That's false imprisonment, a felony that carries serious prison time." My daughter had transformed into Nancy Drew with a smartphone, tracking license plates and maintaining incident logs with dedication that would impress professional investigators. Watching a 12-year-old master documentation techniques that most adults never learn made me proud and heartbroken simultaneously. No kid should need these skills. Buck arrived with cavalry in the form of Jasmine Rodriguez, an agricultural law specialist whose reputation for destroying corporate bullies was legendary throughout farming communities. This woman had dismantled megacorporations like a mechanic tearing down broken engines. Turning David versus Goliath stories into legal precedents, Farm Fresh Friday events became our counteroffensive against Bethany's propaganda war, inviting neighbors to witness our operation firsthand, watching families enjoy gentle animals while security thugs lurked outside like prison guards created optics that even suburbanites couldn't ignore. Nothing quite destroys health hazard narratives like children safely petting horses. Local newspaper editor Sarah Martinez showed up during one Friday gathering. Camera ready and reporter instincts blazing. She'd been tracking this situation for weeks, sensing bigger stories hiding beneath neighborhood disputes. When she photographed security guards intimidating families with young children, her journalistic fury reached nuclear levels. The harassment campaign backfired more spectacularly than New Coke when footage of guards bullying elderly customers went viral on local social media. Public sympathy for intimidated grandmothers buying farm eggs generated outrage that would have made political consultants weep with joy. But I could feel Bethany's desperation growing like storm clouds on summer horizons. Her legal maneuvers had failed. Neighborhood group power plays collapsed and public opinion was turning against her faster than milk in August heat. Cornered predators don't retreat gracefully. They usually launch one final, devastating assault. My surveillance equipment captured increased activity that looked less like security patrols and more like military reconnaissance. More vehicles, extended shifts, aggressive behavior suggesting Bethany was preparing nuclear warfare instead of neighborhood negotiation. Every farming instinct inherited from 3 generations of stubborn survivors warned me that her next move would abandon all pretense of legality for pure overwhelming force designed to end this conflict permanently. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Dolores rifling through old files in her spare bedroom, like an archaeological expedition through bureaucratic history. This woman had kept copies of every significant county document from her 3-decade career, organized with the precision of a Swiss banker and the foresight of someone who understood that paper trails eventually reveal ugly truths. "Ezra, honey," she called me over one evening, her voice carrying that particular excitement reserved for major discoveries. "You need to see what I found buried in these 2023 land transfer records." Spread across her dining room table like evidence from a crime scene were photocopied documents that painted a picture darker than midnight in a coal mine. Bethany's husband hadn't just bought random properties around our area. He'd systematically acquired surrounding farmland through a web of shell companies with names like Tennessee, Agricultural Holdings LLC, and Rural Heritage Development Corp. The pattern emerged like a jigsaw puzzle assembled by someone with infinite patience and evil intentions. Every property purchase positioned his holdings in a perfect circle around our farm. Development plans hidden in county filing cabinets revealed his ultimate vision: a luxury subdivision called Pastoral Meadows Estates, with our farm converted into a community amenity space. Fancy language for stealing our livelihood, to create a centerpiece for his suburban kingdom. But the real smoking gun lay buried in email chains that Dolores had somehow acquired through her network of retired county employees. Messages between Bethany, her husband, and County Commissioner Harold Fitzpatrick discussed the problem property situation. With the casual callousness of people planning weekend barbecues instead of destroying family legacies, once we eliminate the agricultural eyesore, one email read, property values should increase 40 to 60% across the development zone. Conservative projections show $12 million profit margin within 18 months of acquisition. Okay. $1 million. That's what our family's heritage was worth to these vultures. Not the 80 years of soil improvement, not the 3 generations of sustainable farming practices, not the community relationships built through honest work and quality products, just raw profit extracted from rural destruction. The scope of corruption made my head spin like a carnival ride designed by sadists. This wasn't petty neighborhood group tyranny driven by suburban control issues. This was coordinated real estate fraud involving county officials, shell companies, and systematic harassment campaigns. It's designed to force below-market property sales. Other heritage farms throughout the county were experiencing similar pressure. The Patterson Ranch had received surprise tax assessments that tripled their annual burden. Miller's Organic Dairy faced sudden environmental compliance investigations despite operating cleanly for decades. Every targeted property shared one common thread: prime development potential for Bethany's husband's expansion plans, the harassment. Campaigns suddenly made perfect sense through this lens of organized crime. Every violation notice, every security patrol, every neighborhood group meeting designed to create unbearable pressure that would force desperate farmers to sell quickly and cheaply rather than fight prolonged legal battles they couldn't afford. Federal mail fraud charges seemed inevitable when examining the evidence. Pattern of deception, interstate shell companies, systematic use of postal services to further criminal enterprises. RICO racketeering allegations practically wrote themselves when documenting coordinated efforts involving multiple conspirators working toward common illegal goals. Maple asked if we'd lose the farm like Grandpa had feared during the Great Depression, her young voice carrying worry that no child should bear. I promised we'd fight with everything we had, but privately felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of corruption we were facing. This wasn't David versus Goliath. This felt more like David versus Goliath's entire extended family, their lawyers, and half the local government. Buck confirmed similar pressure on his cattle ranch when we shared Dolores's discoveries. Development interests had been circling his property like buzzards, making unsolicited offers while simultaneously filing nuisance complaints about agricultural odors and livestock noise. But Dolores had one more surprise that would change everything. You might want to check that mail from the county more carefully, she suggested with a mysterious smile that reminded me of my grandmother sharing family secrets. That appointment letter might be more useful than you realize. I'd been so focused on defending against attacks that I'd barely glanced at routine government correspondence, but buried in the stack of county notices was an official appointment. A letter that would shift this entire power dynamic in ways Bethany couldn't possibly anticipate. Sometimes the universe provides exactly the weapons you need precisely when you need them most. The appointment letter sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon I'd forgotten I owned. Interim Land Use Commissioner, position I'd applied 4 months ago and completely forgotten about in the chaos of fighting Bethany's harassment campaign, as the irony was sweeter than fresh honey. The woman trying to destroy my farm had no idea. I now held authority over every development, permit, and zoning appeal in the county, including her husband's entire empire. Jasmine Rodriguez practically purred when I showed her the letter during our strategy meeting. "This changes everything," she said, spreading legal documents across my dining room table like a general planning military campaigns. "You're not just defending your property anymore. You're positioned to investigate and potentially halt their entire operation." Buck arrived with a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead and enthusiasm that could power small cities. "You realize what this means?" He grinned, slapping the appointment letter. "Every permit they need, every zoning variance, every development approval has to cross your desk. They've been playing chess while you've been handed the nuclear codes. The Heritage Farm Coalition assembled in my barn like a war council of agricultural resistance fighters. Local farmers who'd been suffering similar harassment brought evidence, documentation, and decades of combined wisdom about fighting corporate land grabs. The smell of hay and determination, mixed with diesel exhaust from trucks parked outside, created this atmosphere of rural solidarity that would have made my grandfather proud. Dolores connected us with her network of retired county employees, people who remembered when government served communities instead of developers. These folks had witnessed corruption cycles before and knew exactly where bodies were buried in bureaucratic graveyards. Former surveyor Jim Martinez brought original property maps showing how shell company purchases violated historical easements and water rights. Our legal strategy crystallized around Tennessee's Agricultural Protection Act, which provides federal civil rights protections for heritage farming operations facing discriminatory harassment. Jasmine explained that systematic campaigns to force agricultural land sales through intimidation and false regulatory pressure constituted federal violations worth triple damages under civil rights statutes. "Here's something most people don't know," Jasmine said while organizing evidence files. "When neighborhood groups primarily benefit private development interests instead of genuine community welfare, they lose their tax-exempt status and face potential fraud charges. Your documentation of payments to Bethany's husband's companies could trigger IRS investigations that make federal prosecutions look gentle. The financial warfare component involved challenging every aspect of their shell company network. Corporate filings revealed address irregularities, fictitious business registrations, and accounting discrepancies that screamed money laundering to anyone with basic forensic training. We'd request audits, demand transparency, and force them to justify every suspicious transaction under oath. Meanwhile, April had organized her school friends into an unofficial surveillance network that would have impressed intelligence agencies. These kids rode bicycles around the county, photographing suspicious activities and documenting harassment incidents with the dedication of junior FBI agents. Social media campaigns using hashtags like Save Heritage Farms and Stop Farm Bullies were spreading faster than wildfire through rural communities. The PR campaign framed our story as corporate, greed versus family tradition. David fighting Goliath with documentation instead of slingshots. Sarah Martinez from the local newspaper committed to an investigative series highlighting heritage farm preservation and exposing development corruption. Regional agricultural magazines picked up the story, creating pressure that would reach state agricultural departments and federal oversight agencies. Buck coordinated crowdfunding for legal expenses through farming communities across multiple states. Turns out our battle resonated with rural families nationwide who'd faced similar corporate pressure campaigns. Donations poured in from strangers who understood that losing heritage farms meant losing pieces of American agricultural history. Resource gathering accelerated like a well-oiled machine. Volunteer networks for document review, research assistance, and media coordination merged organically from farming communities that had been waiting decades for someone to fight back effectively against development corruption. Retired lawyers, former government employees, and agricultural advocates rallied around our cause with enthusiasm that bordered on religious fervor. The technical preparation involved mastering my new commissioner powers. While maintaining absolute ethical standards, I'd recuse myself from any decisions directly affecting my property, instead appointing independent review panels that couldn't be accused of bias or conflict of interest. Every action would be transparent, documented, and legally bulletproof. But The real power shift came when I realized Bethany's husband needed my approval for every aspect of his development projects. Zoning variances, environmental impact assessments, infrastructure permits, everything required commissioner authorization. That now rested in hands belonging to the farmer they'd been trying to destroy. The universe has a sense of humor darker than midnight coffee and twice as satisfying. Word travels faster than gossip in small towns. And news of my commissioner appointment hit Bethany like a freight train loaded with karma and cosmic justice. Within 24 hours, she'd discovered through county courthouse chatter that the farmer she'd been terrorizing now held authority over her husband's entire development empire. Her reaction was more spectacular than 4th of July fireworks and twice as explosive. Bethany launched a smear campaign that would have impressed political mudslinging consultants, claiming unprecedented conflict of interest and abuse of governmental power before I'd even made a single official decision. She flooded local social media with posts about corruption and cronyism, apparently forgetting that glass houses make poor platforms for throwing stones. The irony burned hotter than summer asphalt. A woman who'd been using neighborhood group positions to harass farmers for her husband's profit was now lecturing others about ethical violations. But desperate people rarely recognize their own hypocrisy. Bethany was nothing if not desperately committed to stealing our land. Her sabotage campaign escalated beyond harassment into outright warfare. Anonymous complaints flooded the state. Agriculture Department, claiming our farm violated every regulation from livestock housing to organic certification standards. These weren't random grievances. Someone with inside knowledge was filing specific, detailed accusations designed to trigger expensive investigations and compliance reviews. Then our irrigation system started failing in ways that defied mechanical logic. Pumps that had run reliably for decades suddenly developed mysterious electrical problems. Water lines that had never leaked began springing holes overnight. The smell of diesel fuel appeared in our pond one morning, suggesting deliberate contamination. That could have killed our fish and ruined our organic certification. Our customer vehicles started receiving parking tickets when visiting the farm, despite parking on private property where county enforcement had no jurisdiction. The tickets were bogus, but fighting them required time and money that most customers couldn't afford. Bethany was systematically destroying our customer base through bureaucratic terrorism, but here's where her desperation created fatal mistakes. The state agriculture inspector who showed up for a surprise visit turned out to be Danny Rodriguez, my old college roommate who'd gone into agricultural compliance after graduation. Danny took one look around our operation, then pulled me aside with a grin that could have powered small cities. "Ezra, this complaint is pure fiction," he said, while photographing our immaculate facilities. "Whoever filed this has never seen a real farm violation. This reads like someone Googled agriculture regulations and threw random accusations at a wall hoping something would stick." Danny's investigation revealed patterns that screamed coordinated harassment rather than legitimate regulatory concerns. The complaints contained technical language errors that suggested they'd been written by lawyers rather than farmers. And the timing coincided perfectly with Bethany's other escalation tactics. Meanwhile, I used my new commissioner authority strategically and ethically. Instead of making decisions that could appear retaliatory, I appointed an independent review panel to evaluate all pending development permits in the county, 3 retired judges, 2 environmental scientists, and an agricultural economist would review every application with fresh eyes and 0 political pressure. The panel's first action was requesting comprehensive environmental impact studies for all major development projects, including detailed assessments of agricultural displacement, water table effects, and traffic impact on rural communities. Suddenly, Bethany's husband faced months of expensive studies and potential delays that could derail his entire timeline. Bethany's panic manifested in increasingly erratic behavior that made reality TV drama queens look dignified. She started showing up at my property line, screaming accusations about corruption while my security cameras captured every unhinged moment. These weren't strategic harassment campaigns, so someone losing control of both her plans and her sanity. The criminal investigation into our pond contamination yielded forensic evidence that diesel fuel had been deliberately introduced through our water intake system, Sheriff's deputies found tire tracks and footprints suggesting nighttime sabotage, and chemical analysis revealed fuel additives that matched samples from Marcus Webb's construction equipment.